Welcome to the 13th episode of Rivanna Review, a program of stories, features, and book reviews. My name is Robert Boucheron. I will be your host for a half hour of reading aloud with author photographs and illustrations. The print magazine, Rivanna Review, is published 4 times a year in Charlottesville, Virginia, on the Rivanna River. The magazine is available in bookstores on the Main Street Mall in Charlottesville and other bookstores in Virginia. You can order a copy or a subscription from the website, rivannareview.com. Contributors live all over the world and they write about places far and wide. In this episode, we will visit Las Vegas, Nevada after a boxing match, a dispute among letters of the alphabet, the Crooked Road Music Heritage Trail in Southwest Virginia, and Co-Art Gallery in Stanton, Virginia. Book reviews are of small press titles and authors you may not know about. In this episode, Robert Beauregard reviews Still Pictures by Janet Malcolm and In Praise of Good Bookstores by Jeff Deutsch in Chicago. Ed Meek reviews The Flounder, stories by John Fulton set in the American West, southern France, and Switzerland. And I review Robert Morgan's stories set in the mountains of North Carolina. Story, The Taste of Blood by R.B. Miner. Mark Hill sat slumped in a metal chair. There was no pain yet, just a gentle throbbing in places. He had rinsed his mouth a half-dozen times, but the taste of blood persisted. He spat onto the white tile floor and was disappointed that his saliva was clear. There were 4 of them in the locker room, and none of them knew what to say. It was so quiet that Mark could hear the electricity in the light bulbs, a dozen houseflies buzzing. A Las Vegas locker room feels glamorous before a fight, with cameras and press and friends around. Less than an hour earlier, this one had been full of promise and had been full of the tingling anticipation of war. Now the room was absent any sanctity. In the wake of the loss, he barely felt like a professional, like it was 1998 and he was walking into the gym in Bay Ridge as a 12-year-old kid. He had thought about all that had changed in the 15 years that passed. Here were the same ones who'd been with him when he started: Al Leader, his corner man, Hallie, his wife, Ben, his brother, yet he had never felt so at odds with the people he loved. Through the eye that wasn't swollen shut, Mark saw that Hallie's cheeks were streaked with mascara. She was shaking, and Ben had a steadying arm around her shoulders. Had it really seemed so bad from the crowd? Al, leaning against the lockers with his arms crossed, broke the silence. "You ready for me to cut you out of those wraps?" Mark nodded. He waved Al toward him and grimaced as he pushed himself straighter in the chair. He was becoming aware of his body again. He tried to take a deep breath, but stopped short at a dagger in his right side. He knew that feeling. At least one of the ribs was broken. Al pulled a stool in front of the chair. He took Mark's right hand and pressed on the knuckles. "Any pain?" Mark shook his head, ashamed. If he was going to hurt any place, he wanted it to be there. Al began slicing through the tape and gauze on Mark's hand, his wispy hair clinging to sweat on the wrinkled crown of his head. He squinted at his work through thick glasses. "My fault, kid," Al said, tossing the excised wrap to the ground. He moved on to Mark's left hand without looking up. Mark touched Al's hand. "Not your fault." Al's lower lip trembled. He pushed Mark's hand away and kept cutting. Ben came to his side, a slight paunch visible between the sides of his charcoal sport coat. When had he gotten fat? It felt like yesterday that they'd been training together, then seeking out street fights on the way home from the gym. He put a hand on Mark's shoulder. "You need anything, little brother?" "Get me a drink." "I don't know if I can." "We're in Vegas, Benny. Get me a damn drink." Ben sighed. "I'll find you something." He glanced up at Hallie on his way out. The press outside the locker room sounded like a clan of hyenas as the door swung open. Not yet," Ben said, and the door closed. Then the locker room was quiet again. In the silence, Mark looked to Hallie, wrapped in a red dress, a white feather boa draped over her shoulders. She only held his gaze for a second before she turned away. Story, The XYZ Affair by Linda Teasel. Citing a lack of respect from the literary community, the last three letters of the alphabet have announced their intention to secede. X, Y, and Z released a statement. For too long, we accepted the status quo, relegated to the end of every list and lumped together in one index tab. In the digital age, we must all stand up and be counted. We reject the negative connotations assigned to X, the false air of mystery, the inferior brand, and the loose content. We regard the supposed ambiguity of Y, is it a vowel or a consonant, as a crude attempt to impose a binary dialectic on a multivalent dynamic. And we protest the assumption that there is something funny about Z. Together, we make up over 10% of the alphabet. As an underrepresented minority, we hereby call out the bourgeois majority. A bright future lies ahead for the three who pursue independence, for the 23 letters who choose to remain the same old thing, unquote. The numbers 0 through 9 have stated no position on the impending split, though they often appear with X, Y, and Z in algebra. X already does double duty as the multiplication symbol. How will the many punctuation marks, accents, and diacritical signs react? Some in the mainstream alphabet were quick to point out that while relatively few words begin with X, Y, and Z, the letters occur within words. They play a vital role, Dee said. Proper names should be taken into account, and those begin with one of the three are all the more memorable. On the other hand, one letter that comes at or near the beginning of the alphabet dismissed the announcement by the seldom used letters. This popular vowel spoke off the record. We don't need those guys. For spelling their deadwood, totally redundant. X can be replaced by KS, and Y is just a fancy pants version of I. If they want to go off and do their own thing, I say good riddance. What about Z? The vowel made a raspberry and turned away. Logistical hurdles stand in the way of secession, millions of keyboards, existing texts, and sets of children's blocks. Reach for comment, W urged caution. If and when the letters depart, W will be in an exposed position, cut off at the end. Already it is closely associated with X, Y, and Z in address books and pocket references. Less forceful than letters such as P and T, the semiconsonant notes that it has suffered the same criticism leveled at Y since it acts as a vowel after E and O. I've been accused of being a diphthong. Feature, The Crooked Road by Christy Bell. On a Friday morning in April 2012, I weaved in and out of lines of semis, motoring down Interstate 81 north of Roanoke, Virginia. My destination was Tazewell, on the far western border, where I was due to co-teach an incident command system course over the weekend. Searching for a radio station to keep me company, I landed on WVTF in Roanoke, a program called The Thistle and Shamrock, featuring Celtic music. The program host, Fiona Ritchie, entranced me, her voice a dip and sail, hill and hollow. It wasn't a stretch to see myself traveling through a long, verdant dale in the Scottish Highlands, where the program originated. The landscape around me was like that, gradations of green turning their faces toward the sun. My thoughts reeled and waltzed with the music. Having just read Mark Zwonitzer and Charles Hirschberg's excellent group biography of the Carter family, Will You Miss Me When I'm Gone, I harbored a head full of A.P. Carter catching songs in the mountains surrounding Poor Valley, close to where I was bound. The original Carter family, widely recognized as the first family of country music, hailed from Mesa's Spring, Virginia, in Scott County. It consisted of Alvin Pleasant Carter, his wife Sarah, and his sister-in-law and Sarah's cousin Maybelle Carter. A.P. Carter was a prolific, if mercurial, song collector and arranger. According to the biography, when they performed, he'd step in to sing a tremulous bass for a few lines here and there, or sometimes lay out altogether. If A.P. found the songs, the women carried the music. In July 1927, the family drove nearly a full day to Bristol, Virginia, to answer an ad seeking local artists to record. Ralph Peer, a music executive with Victor Records, headed the Bristol recording sessions, paying $50 for each song recorded. The Carters were a centerpiece of these sessions, and they proved to be the rock dropped in the center of a musical pond. The ripples spread throughout southwestern Virginia and the rest of the country as well. They were also felt across time, influencing musicians from Chet Atkins to Emmylou Harris. Even today, many a traveler explores Virginia's Crooked Road Heritage Music Trail to find that the land that inspired the music is largely unchanged, even as the music has evolved. The trail covers a 330-mile swath through the mountains of southwest Virginia, encompassing nearly 70 venues, lily pads in the musical stream of Appalachia. Most have a mission similar to the Carter family fold, dedicated to the preservation and presentation of traditional bluegrass and old-time music. The Crooked Road wasn't on my radar in 2012, but I'd uncover sections of it by degrees, my appreciation and personal connection deepening over time. What I knew then was that the air hummed with possibility. I fancied myself a part-time poet, so I checked my backpack to make sure I packed my journal. Traveling sales with a side of song catching may have worked for AP, but a government job paid this would-be troubadour's bills. The job was to manage training for the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, or VDEM, based in Richmond. I needed someone who understood how to work public safety in a rural setting. Feature, Co-Art Gallery by Beth Ford. Co-Art Gallery, a cooperative art gallery in downtown Stanton, Virginia, is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. As part of the celebration, 16 members created a group art project. Each artist was given a square panel with a portion of the numerals 25 marked. Though each artist chose the colors, materials, and layout of his or her panel independently, much of the work was completed during group sessions. A reception was held on March 25th, which was well attended by the community at large, including the mayor of Stanton, Stephen Claffey. One of the member artists, Michael Bedwell, provided the musical accompaniment for part of the evening. When not singing and playing guitar, Bedwell takes photographs in Highland County, Virginia. The gallery had its inception in 1997 with the vision of 45 artists and faculty from the Beverly Street Studio School and other local arts organizations. The group transformed a former retail space into the gallery, which opened its doors in January 1998. It provides a comfortable, affordable location for artists to showcase their art. Over the years, more than 135 artists have been members. The gallery currently has almost 40 members from Stanton, Monterey, Waynesboro, Charlottesville, and the surrounding counties. 8 are the original founding members. Deborah Sheffer explains that when the gallery was founded, she was a young mother and she looked up to many of the other artists. Now it is her turn to mentor younger artists. Over the years, the gallery has continued to be, quote, important on a professional and social level, she says. It's a supportive group of artists. We all encourage each other, no matter what our medium is, and keep each other abreast of upcoming show opportunities, unquote. Barbara Phillips, also a founding member, says that she has benefited, quote, I've been able to show and sell my work, have participated in other venues and activities I learned about through the gallery, made lasting friendships, been inspired by the work of other members, learned about arranging and installing a show, and been able to meet and talk with many visitors over the years, unquote. Allison Thomas, who joined in January 2023, says, it is a learning experience, but there's a lot of help here, unquote. She has already noticed this gallery's standing locally and further afield. It's amazing. We get a lot of people from out of town. It seems like this is a well-known place for people to come over and over again when they visit Stanton. Michael Bedwell, who joined in November 2022, appreciates, quote, being part of an artistic community where ideas get together and cross-pollinate. I already have learned a lot about how to display things, how to frame, and what sells. Book review, Still Pictures by Janet Malcolm. Throughout an illustrious career as a journalist, Janet Malcolm was known for her sharp insights and skills as a writer. From her early pieces on photography for The New Yorker to her books on psychoanalysis, she set a high bar. One of them, Psychoanalysis: The Impossible Profession, won the National Book Award. Others on crime, Iphigenia in Forest Hills, Sylvia Plath, The Silent Woman, and Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas, Two Lives. She wrote essays on such notables as the painter David Sala and the fashion designer Eileen Fisher. Written just before her death in 2021, this memoir of a life closely observed is equally accomplished. Much of the book is taken up by Malcolm's remembrances of her emigre family, relatives, and friends. On the opening page of almost every chapter is a snapshot. The first is of a 2 or 3-year-old girl sitting on a stone step, dressed in a polka dot sunsuit and matching sun hat. Malcolm observes, "No feeling of identification stirs as I look at her round face and thin arms and her incongruously assertive pose." A few pages later, a 1939 photograph of Malcolm and her parents on a train introduces the family's flight from Czechoslovakia. Initially, they lived in Brooklyn, but soon moved to Manhattan, where her father became a village doctor for the Yorkville Czechs. There, Malcolm attended PS 82 and internalized the anti-Semitism in the culture. It wasn't until later that she and her sister learned an anti-Semitic slur that a classmate informed her of her Jewishness. "We were shocked and mortified to learn that we were not on the good side of the equation," unquote. Nevertheless, Malcolm grew up in a family that was ordinary, middle century, professional middle class, neither rich nor poor, with no social pretensions. She idolized her father. He loved opera, birds, mushrooms, wildflowers, poetry, baseball. "I am flooded with things I want to say about him," she said. Of her mother, Malcolm's letters home from college, she later realized, were empty of the intimacy her mother craved. The fear of speaking from the heart is deep-seated. We form the habit of defending ourselves against rejection early on. But God, what a jerk I was. What would it have cost me to tell her that I loved her? Malcolm also writes of her young friends. There was Arna Lewis. "I was 17 and he was 18 and we were seriously in love." Gilberto of summer camp. Others, in common with much of mankind, I was infected early on with the virus of romance. There was the rebellious Francine, who encouraged Malcolm to be more impulsive. Bad girls, it seems, were irresistible. Book review in praise of good bookstores by Jeff Deutsch. What makes a good bookstore? One whose aisles and shelves irresistibly beckon. Drawing on his nearly 30 years as a bookseller, Jeff Deutsch reflects on this question and another. What makes a good bookseller? Without one, a bookstore is just another retail space. Good bookstores don't happen by accident. They require a bookseller who selects and assembles books with discernment and enthusiasm. The books then need to be positioned in ways that encourage browsing, pique interest, and allow for discovery. The bookseller respects the customer's privacy, but is willing to help and engage in conversation. As important, the good bookseller must be able to manage the least interesting part of the job, selling. As Deutsch says, a bookstore is not a money-making proposition. In a world where Amazon sells books as a loss leader for other commodities, and online retailers like Thrift Books, Biblio, and Abe Books are easily accessed, a place-based bookseller cannot survive on book sales alone. This is why so many bookstores have sidelines, such as greeting cards, stationery, puzzles, and socks. A good bookstore is a place where readers can find the book they have in mind or browse a large and eclectic array of titles. It allows for contemplation and for, quote, the experience of being among books, unquote. It offers opportunities for discovery through the adjacency of categories, and it strikes a balance between current and enduring titles, between popular books and the esoteric, between the beach read and the intellectual challenge. As Deutsch says, Good bookstores reflect their communities. Exceptional bookstores both reflect and create their communities. They allow for a balance between privacy and conviviality, solitude and engagement. One can chat amiably with other browsers or approach the staff for advice or do neither. Most important, good bookstores and the books we purchase from them serve our souls. Serious bookstores provide the concentrate of the examined life. Given the shrinkage in independent bookstores over the last few decades and competition from online sellers, Deutsch also considers how bookstores can survive economically. The profit margins are thin. Offering a vast, low-selling inventory that attracts a wide range of readers works against a bookstore's economics. But for him, selling sidelines is out of the question. Since 2014, Deutsch has been the manager of Seminary Co-op bookstores in Chicago, one of the country's largest academic bookstores. It began as a cooperative with membership dues. For years, it operated at a significant loss. Now it has become a not-for-profit entity. Deutsch argues that bookstores can only stay in business if they draw on the gift economy, by which he seems to mean soliciting grants. Book review, The Flounder by John Fulton. John Fulton is an accomplished writer with a novel and 2 short story collections published. He's won a Pushcart Prize and appeared in Best American Stories. Fulton has a feel for the uncertainty of our age. In The Flounder, his characters are awkward with each other. They grapple with how to love one another and how to deal with childhood pain from fathers who walked out and mothers who were left fearful and sad. They may have grown up religious, and although they no longer are, they still struggle with what they believe in. The stories jump right into conflict. A store owner being held up at gunpoint tells the robber to go ahead and shoot him, he's dying anyway. In the title story, placed at the end of the book, a young American couple in Switzerland is having trouble with sex, pregnancy, and emotional expression. In the first sentence, Marion confesses to her husband Daniel that she slept with someone else just before they leave for a vacation. The Côte d'Azur and its seafood, a large flounder, work their magic. Fulton grew up in Montana and lived in Europe for a number of years. He is able to write with authority about both settings. He gives us an insider's perspective on the American West and on places like Budapest and Switzerland. This small, pragmatic, greedy culture where there was no romance, certainly not associated with marriage, a legal bond used in case a couple should have kids or want their taxes lowered. The Western writer Bill Kittredge says that in order for fiction to be effective, the writer, like a juggler, has to keep a number of story strands up in the air at once. In his best stories, Fulton does just that. In Nocturne, a young couple, Miriam and Daniel, who fight a lot, comically have to fight in whispers when they rent rooms from an older Swiss woman, because the Swiss do not want to be disturbed, ever. Because the older woman sees them as a happy young couple, they are forced to act as if that is true. No one in Fulton's stories is completely honest or forthright with a partner. Instead, they engage in power struggles while talking around things. Fulton is very good at capturing the nuances of our thoughts and relationships. The title, Nocturne, refers to a piece by Chopin. The hostess one night plays it beautifully, and the music seems to draw the couple back together. In a short story collection, as in a book of poems, we have to judge the author by his best work. By that standard, The Flounder is delicious. Book review, In the Snowbird Mountains by Robert Morgan. Robert Morgan was born in Hendersonville, North Carolina, and he grew up on a family farm. From 1971 to 2022, he was a professor of English at Cornell University. Morgan still lives in Ithaca, New York, but most of his fiction is set in the place where he grew up. In the Snowbird Mountains follows suit. Here are 8 new stories, of which 7 are set in the past and present in western North Carolina, and 1 is set in Florida in the 1930s. Morgan has never lost interest in the geology, biology, and cultural history of his native land. All of these inform the stories. Judaculla Rock takes off from a natural outcrop of soapstone carved by Native Americans with mysterious figures and signs called petroglyphs near Cullowhee, North Carolina. Hurricane, the Florida story, shows a detailed knowledge of that area, how a tropical storm acts, and what it feels like on the ground. For all the historic and scientific information, Morgan never lets it interfere with telling a good story. Plot, suspense, a wealth of realistic details, and often a surprised twist in the plot are his stock in trade. Fishing, hunting, hiking in the woods, observing wildlife, and dealing with weather are his usual subjects. The wildlife ranges from delightful songbirds to bears that threaten to attack. Quote, "The smell of a bear is hard to describe, like a closet of dirty clothes, of rancid, unwashed hair." The woods are not merely full of trees, but differentiated as to hardwood, scrub pine, a slick of laurel or rhododendron, and ferns identified by genus and species. Characters get lost in the woods. They suffer pain, thirst, and hunger, and they suffer from poachers, thieves, and an escaped mental patient. Park rangers can go either way. They cite the hero for violations, and they rescue him from dire predicaments. In the tradition of Appalachian storytelling, Morgan also likes to exaggerate, bend the truth, play with legends, and flirt with the supernatural. In The Body on Mount Mitchell, a hiker in the woods encounters a large and deadly alligator, like a tale of an escaped pet baby alligator come to life. The historical fact that gold was found in North Carolina in the early 1800s leads to the wild tale of Devil's Courthouse, where the hero explores a cave, finds evidence of mining and human bones, and speculates the bones are from Spanish captives in the 1600s. In Beyond the Outer Banks, the hero finds a number of people from his past in his house, people who have died and who gently break the news that he just died in a highway crash.